Moments later, I look up, and then right in front of me, Libby, were just these countless fields and countless angels that were flying and floating right in front of my very eyes. The angels that I saw are oftentimes referenced in biblical scriptures known as a cherub, which is a childlike angel. When I saw the angels that were in front of me, they were just there sending love, sending beauty to all of the earth and to the situation. And I was trying to look at them, but they were more concerned with just looking forward and sending.
Jacob, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, what an honor it is. And I know we're talking before the show. I just couldn't thank you enough for the work that you're doing on your podcast and just how many lives are impacted by this opportunity. And I'm very inspired by your work and what you're doing. So I couldn't thank you enough for having me on.
The feeling is mutual. I'm very inspired by you too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we start by you sharing a little bit about your experience?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things to do, Libby. For those of you who don't know, I had something called an NDE, or near-death experience, which is getting a lot of traction these days, made possible by places like Netflix, which has had a documentary a couple of years ago called Surviving Death, featured NDEs. But NDEs have been around for thousands of years, referenced in, biblical and Plato and all that stuff. And there's been a lot of, Hollywood popular figures such as Elizabeth Taylor and Sharon Stone, I believe, who's had one. And most recently, Tracy Morgan are some of the people out there in the public I've had them. But NDEs right now are around 5 to 10% of the population. And as science and medical and advancements are unfolding, we're probably going to have a lot more. So for viewers who are not sure about an NDE, it's just, you're a part of your body just flatlines and ceases to exist, but then there's this whole other part of you that has continuity. So we'll get into a little bit, hopefully, of what NDEs really mean and the implications on our lives. But for me personally, and I'm sorry about getting tangential, I'm a little bit ADHD, New Yorker kind of guy. I had an NDE in September of 1993 where I was just chronological age of 3 years old. In this situation, I had something called pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough. And for those who are not familiar with pertussis or whooping cough, it could be fatal for kids as young as I was, and for children, infants, and very dangerous even for adults if left untreated. But I went to a playground with family friends, and I just completely suffocated as a result of this. There was nothing to hold on to. It's like, you could imagine like you're drowning and you're sinking below the surface of the water and just trying to grab onto a log, and you're trying as much as you can to fight this. But there was nothing I can do but just surrender to what was to happen. And so I stopped trying to breathe. I stopped struggling to breathe, and I just kind of let go. And I just saw my body and my brain just completely deprived of oxygen. And the last thing that I remembered within my body was this loud cracking sound within my brain. And I just, felt this incredible crack within my brain, and literally my brain cracked open. And that's when God in the spirit realm came in. And we have all these euphemisms, that's saying my brain cracked open and God came in. That happened to me literally, where I just had a lot of classical near-death experience sensations, which some people could have distressive, but for me, this was more elevated and euphoric and mystical, where I had a full crossing over experience. I felt myself lift out of my body, like accelerating like 1,000 miles an hour, as if you're on the fastest possible car in the world or on this crazy ride at a roller coaster, just going upwards and upwards and just feeling as if there's no limitation with how good you could possibly feel. In the body, we're not used to that. We're used to being bioneurochemical and just having like just a cap of how good we could feel. When I was crossing over to the other side, euphoria was without limitation. And I just can't describe how beautiful that is. Moments later, I was really cognizant of my body, which was at a playground on that day, but I was able to feel behind the right side of my brain, which, if you could tell right now, I have an angel behind me there with reason, but I felt and saw this palace structure. And I looked at it and it was so beautiful and it was almost blinding with its beauty. And I just had to like shield myself because it was so much. I was able to feel angels around it and it was just so profound. And in looking at this, I just knew it was, in a way, a representation of what some would call God or the universe or the center of creation. But to me, it's where everything that was created, everything that came out of life was birthed from. And, to me, God is just eternal creative life force, creative life source. And I just knew that was the centerpiece of all of reality as I knew it. And it was just so powerful, so comforting, and yet such a transition from this physical realm where everything is so dense and has its limitations. And when I was just crossing over, there was just so much beauty beyond any descriptive words. And I had just a lot of questions in mind, such as, what would my parents feel, if I cross over, and what would I look like? And I felt like I was leaving this life very early at 3 years old and just wondering what could have been the rest of this story of this play. It felt like I was just leaving it so early. I was just very blindsided. And then all of a sudden I just felt this incredible peace overtaking my being. And I felt these clouds unfolding in front of me as if this eternal golden sky was there. And I felt a lot of near-death experiences will mention Jesus or Christ or stuff like that in physical presentation. But to me, this was a consciousness. This was the representation of that which we know. And it was just this incredibly high vibrational octave on the other side. And when you think of energy, as Einstein said, you think of vibrations. And on the other side, it's a much higher vibrational frequency, which is why we can't see it. It's like a fan. And when the individual blades in the fan are spinning, you can't see those individual blades, but they're still there, but they're spinning so fast that you can't see them. And in this moment, I just felt this incredible release of ease. And I felt all of my fears were taken away. And I just knew I was in the presence of the timelessness on the other side, where there was no future, there was no past. There was just an eternal moment of the present where all is well, was well, will be well. And I just had this overwhelming sense of peace, as well as this release, where I just knew no matter what, if I stayed in my body or if I went on the other side, I was always going to be connected to my loved ones, and we were going to meet at the same exact point, whether I stayed or gone. And no matter what, we were eternally connected. Moments later, I felt my own guardian angels or spirit guides, which we accrue many different, the term is spirit guides, whether you want to say London or UK or Great Britain, it's all kind of describing the same thing, but these were primary guides, which we all have before we get to this earth plane. We're contracted with them. And when I saw them, they were just the most magnificent, beautiful beings that I could possibly describe. It's the one detail of my near-death experience, for whatever reason, that I just don't remember the exact specific names of them. Today I just call them the guides, but I do remember it was a male and female guide that were with me. And I just felt this sense of embarrassment that I just forgot that they were with me at each step of my journey. And there's so much around us at all times that sometimes our human filters are not cognizant of, and sometimes forget. But I just saw the guides, and they were just with me unconditionally. And, you could imagine, and I know you work in the Hollywood industry, so I'll give an example. I don't know, what's my biggest crush? Demi Moore, let's just say, right? Imagine, like, I don't know, Demi Moore, or, I don't know, my lookalike Joaquin Phoenix is around, and, you have this infatuation with that person. You just feel like, oh my God, they're just so angelic, so otherworldly. And at times we will put people on pedestals thinking they're just so above me. But imagine that same exact feeling or thought energy that you have towards that individual is reciprocated to you times 1,000. You're just speechless. You're just like, who am I for you to invest yourself? You're over here and I'm just a pauper. But that's not the way the spirit realm works. They look up at you and not down, and they see the real you, which is, we all have it, an infinite spark of divinity. We all have the divine spark, and that's our true nature. And then moments later, I just was on the ground in the playground, and people were surrounding me, and they're trying to shake my body, trying to call up my name. And I wanted to shake them as much as I can, saying, I'm still here. I'm here. And I could understand maybe how loved ones feel on the other side, where they're trying to get attention. They're doing every manipulative tactic to get through to us, and oftentimes using technology or lights to get our attention. But they're around at all times, and I felt that firsthand in my NDE. When I saw the people around me that were with me, I just felt a clear understanding that I am not my body. I have a body, but that is not who I am. It's just a vehicle in this life. It's something that my soul is experiencing itself in this life, but that was not me, and I felt a form to the side of my body of who I really was, an infinite, eternal, ageless, and timeless spirit that wasn't just this 3-year-old kid, but rather that was just a journey that I was on temporarily. And then I looked around at all the people that were with me at the playground on that day, and I saw, when I looked into them, I was able to have full transparency of their soul, and I was able to see their angels around them and their aura around them. And it just, when we reflect on that, sometimes we'll have an association of something that's spiritual or holy or sacred, and some people keep that. They remember who they are. But I could tell you, at our core, all is spiritual, all is sacred, and sometimes people just don't remember that, and there's a lot of barriers of the ego that get in the way of who we really are. Moments later, I look up, and then right in front of me, Libby, were just these countless fields and countless angels that were flying and floating right in front of my very eyes. Versus, people ask, what's the difference of an angel and a spirit guide? The angels that I saw are oftentimes referenced in biblical scriptures known as a cherub, which is a childlike angel, versus my guides were full-blown, middle-aged adults, and they had their own individualized characteristics and more of like a humanity to them. When I saw the angels that were in front of me, they were all very similar and uniformal. There wasn't distinctive characteristics to them, but they were just there sending love, sending beauty to all of the earth and to the situation. And I was trying to look at them, but they were more concerned with just looking forward and sending. They weren't as concerned with me, whereas my spirit guides were very micro-focused, on me. And I couldn't tell you how real it was, and how in this reality that we see it, just a slight tick above this reality, are angels and beautiful spirits all around us. It's not a million miles away. It's all heaven, and the other side is all over this reality. It's a slight uptick of vibrational frequency, a little filter above this reality, and so much is around us. In that moment, I was met with people that came to me that I just knew were my soul family. And in the theater industry, you'll appreciate the William Shakespeare quote that said life is kind of like a theater or stage, and we're all just playing our roles. Shakespeare, I do like him. He's a Fellatarian, April birth, and brilliant man in the industry. But he has that quote that's so true, that really speaks to how, yes, on one level, we're all a part of the same soul team within this life, but we have nuclear souls that we reincarnate with and that we're tied into contractually throughout different lifetimes. We're all just different method actors in different lifetimes. The same, people that we're involved with, just different roles that we play. Moments later, I just was posed a question, which is, would I stay on the other side or would I go? Which is, most people are told, hey, it's not your time. You have, more work to do, or your purpose is stronger over here than over there, which is something we could get into, hopefully. But, we're all just instruments of spirits, and they'll use us where we need to be. And it's really about the contract that we have with the intelligence that is around us from the higher sources. And all of a sudden, I just said, wow, I want to stay, but who am I? Why am I here? What is this life about? And then all of a sudden, I just began to see these different images of this life, which is known to many as a life review, which you're able to understand it, but you're able to see it through the eyes of another. And people will say, well, that must have been the shortest movie in history. You're only 3 years old. My answer to it is this: it's never a matter of the years of life, but rather the life within the years. And there's people who live 100 years who've never lived a day, and people lived a day who lived 100 years. So, so true. So time is not what we think it is over there. It's really about love and impact and the depth of our experience. That's the measurement of time. So I was able to see that, as well as I saw my soul just spanning the globe, going from different cultures to civilizations and experiences of what some would call as past lives. And the last lifetime that I was with, was very emotional, where I was able to see a lot of students that I worked with and people that I was involved with in that last incarnation that I live. And to this day, before ever saying a public word, on several occasions, different intuitives have picked up exactly what I saw in that last lifetime without me saying one single word publicly and just sitting in a chair. So I knew there was a great degree of NOE, which means no other explanation, without a shadow of doubt. But in this lifetime, I saw that my back was against the wall. I didn't see any hope. And so I made a decision to take my own life. And working in the mental health field, I will never use, again, the word commit when it comes to that, because you don't commit cancer, you don't commit heart disease. I don't criminalize something that someone is going through with pain. And, when it comes to that, and I'll say the word suicide, it's not just mental health, it could be physical. Ironic that my grandmother, before I was born, crossed over due to suicide, and then I was born back 2 months after, this happened. And so there's a lot of family karma, I believe, with that. But I saw the direct correlation with my NDE and this, in a sense that I was back with what many feel, where they're just deprived of all of life's force and there's nothing to hold on to. And you feel this is it. There's no and. Then all of a sudden I decided to let go of my suffocated human breath to surrender to the breath of eternity. And from doing that, I was able to see eternity by looking directly at what I thought was a finite ending. I was able to see an infinite eternity. And that's kind of like that Albert Camus quote, within the dead of the winter, I found an infinite eternal summer. And, that is something that people go through literally, metaphorically. And I'm sure for you and your positionality, you've experience this, but by looking directly at it, we're able to see through it. And sometimes within the dark sky, we have to remember that the darkness is there, but behind the darkness are ways to see the brilliant stars and the moon. Without that, we couldn't see this beautiful light. And so from seeing that, I was able to have premonitions of the life that I would be doing and the people that I would be speaking in front of. And I wasn't just some pompous self-help guru who was better than people, or just living in an ivory tower to do this. I saw that I was speaking, but the just connection was there, and I was able to be one with everyone that I was speaking with, and I was just a gentle reminder of who people really are. And by seeing that, I really remembered that, much like my playground taught me, I had an NDE as a child in a playground, that we're all just children in God's playground here as our brothers and sisters keeper. And it's all about service. And that is the mindset of how to create heaven. And so I said, wow, heaven is always there. Why not create it here? It's always going to be there, but why not elevate this so that we could create a heaven on earth? And with that agreement, everything started to dissipate. All the angels, my loved ones. The last thing I was with were my guides. And I just was like kicking myself around, because when you're over there, it looks a lot better than over here. And just like, what did I just do? I turned down heaven, and now, this is going to happen. And then my guides left me with just this message of just trusting this higher intelligence, trusting the path, that there's a higher intelligence that goes beyond our greatest fears and limitations. And to stop doubting the path that you were blessed with, that you were graced with from higher intelligence. Trust and surrender were the biggest messages. And with that thought, with that understanding, I woke up in a hospital bed, and my mother was with me. And I had to, from that day forward, each and every day, try to make sense of the seemingly unsensible of what I had in my NDE. So that is a little bit of the long and short of what happened to me. And I'm sorry if you have a lot of questions, or if I was on a roll there. But yes, please ask away.
Yes, no, I do have questions, but I loved everything you said. But I do want to say this first. I realized it a little bit ago. The angel behind you,
Mhm.
I have the same one that was my mom's.
Wow, wow. Oh my God. Yeah, well, angels connected us, right? And
Hmm.
she, I'm sure, is so proud of you, Libby, and what you're doing, and having these conversations and finding meaning behind, the life that she lived. And I hope to learn more about her too.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like things like that are definitely signs, and
Oh yeah,
we're where we are supposed to be right now. So
yeah.
I wanted to share that
Well,
we have the
thank
same
you.
angel.
Yeah, not a lot of people have that, and
Hmm.
your mom seemed to be tuned in over here, and certainly she's connected over there and pulling a lot of strings on this theater of life, stage of life. Yeah.
So your near death experience, you were 3.
Hmm.
When you were on the other side, did you have the like 3-year-old mindset, or were you your higher self, or were you both?
That's a brilliant question. I would say the majority of what I experienced was my higher self. Any experience that I had was maybe connected to that 3-year-old was just kind of concerns of that life. There's a bit of an adaptation to the other side, but ultimately it was my higher self. It was my soul. And I will preface this, and this will sound controversial to some parents listening or people who work with kids. I mean, I work with kids all the time as a mental health therapist, in a high, acute setting. I would say that none of us are really our chronological age. On one hand, yes. But on the other hand, we are infinite spiritual beings having these temporary human experience, and we're infinite souls. And so a lot of us walk around with this ego, like I am, this gender, I am this age, I am this job, and all these things are a part of our story, but it would be like taking a thumb and saying this is the whole hand. The thumb is a part of a hand, but it's not the entirety of the hand. And it's an integral part of it. But there's so much more to our BS or belief systems, that we're privy to many times.
Another question about your age over there. You had mentioned visually that your spirit guides were mid-age adults,
Mhm.
and then the angels all looked kind of similar.
Yeah, the angels were very young, like almost infant looking. And yeah.
Was your body, were you 3, or were you in your body?
No, I was outside of my body the entire time, and I just felt a form, but I was not 3-year-old over there. I was an eternal spirit. It's hard for some people to recognize, like two things could be true at the same time. The spirit realm is very non-binary. It's very fluid, and it's very different than this binary structure of a world, that two things could be true at the same time. That yes, undeniably, I was living a life as a 3-year-old, but behind that was this, infinite book with chapters that predated that experience and chapters that will go on far beyond that.
Yes, that is so true. Whenever you came back, you obviously remember your
Mhm.
near death experience. But when you were back in your 3-year-old body and your 3-year-old mind, did you remember what your soul learned over there, or did you have to remember it, or did it always stay with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I believe if you're meant to remember something, you will. And it was very clear that I was meant to remember this. If you're meant to forget it, you will as well. But I had all this, I think memory is the greatest gift that we have. And I think a lot of viewers tune into, Lost and Found and other podcasts, like yours, because of memory, that there is something familiar about what many of your guests who are talking about some of these higher level experiences share, that there's a part of you that remembers what they're talking about. Otherwise, you wouldn't tune in. And so, to me, all about spirituality is just remembering what we know inside of us, and keeping the rest outside. But yes, throughout my life, it was always there. Sometimes it was more intense than others. It wasn't like I was going around thinking about this the whole time, but it was a struggle. I would say that I remember very little about my childhood, infant years. I'm nothing special in that regard. But the only thing is like I can kind of remember are just this NDE and what life was like, transitioning out of this NDE because it was such a traumatic experience. Obviously, working in the mental health field, NDE carries oftentimes a lot of trauma, and I can't think of anything more traumatic that I went through just in terms of pure suffocation, and it was just incredible trauma and distress, and I believe that is a part of it too. But beyond that was my brain was really just shut down. It's literally snapped in half due to the deprivation of oxygen. And so what near-death experiencers are now teaching is the brain is not the producer of life, but it is just the filter. And I could attest to that because when I was in school, I felt the sliver of light going in and out of my brain, and my brain filter was just wide open to the spirit realm. And I was connecting very easily. I would have a lot of premonitions of events to come. I was able to see spirits regularly. But all this were things that I really kept to myself. The one time where I did try to ask a classmate if they were able to see what I saw, I was met with the most bewildered look that you could possibly imagine. It was a very difficult and lonely experience because, as a kid, you're very physically dependent on others. And all of a sudden, mom and dad, they were great, but I just knew that a part of me felt older than them. That they forgot a lot of these things. And that pedestal that I had them on was kind of put down. I just like, wow, the roles are reversed where I might be very young, but I am a lot more connected to this stuff. So I felt older than my surroundings, as well as very isolated at times. So the deprivation of oxygen and suffocation wasn't something that just happened in my NDE. It was something that was happening throughout a lot of my childhood and infinite years because I felt very disconnected and very alone. And that was, but again, part of the journey for myself to develop empathy, understanding, and the passion to reach those who might have went through similar type sensations that I went through throughout all my life almost.
I love that you said the mind is or the brain is a filter for this life.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off that, do you believe that how our brain chemistry is set up is how we are supposed to experience this life?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great question. I think a lot of people are very left brain dominated. And so it's like, I don't know, it's like a song. You have the lyrics today, and not like songs without lyrics, but songs with lyrics. You have the lyrics and then you have the beat. And so if you're just left brain, you're just into the lyrics, but you're not connecting to the beat. You kind of need to have both. So I think so many people are very left brain dominated in this highly analytical society. And from born, we're taught, hey, don't imagine, regurgitate. And so we're shoved all this information, highly pressured developmental trajectories that we're almost forced to just be in this left brain hemisphere. And the left brain is not said to be creative. It's just analytical. And, spirit is creative, eternal life force. That's more like I saw my NDE corresponding to the right side of my brain, which is the side that represents creativity, kind of like the work that you do in your acting work. I would say that the brain, it's really put me into passion to really maximizing and knowing the brain and delving myself into neuroscience, because I do believe certainly mental health is a part of brain health, is a part of mental health. And so I think when people are able to be very balanced, very open within their brains and taking good proactive measures to ensure brain health, that really could enhance itself for you to connect to not only your mental health, but also your spiritual health and spiritual well-being. And, people have really found a lot of neural benefits through practices like mindfulness and how it's really, in meditation as well, how it's able to create different neurological pathways, different neuroplasticities, as well as improved prefrontal cortexes, which relates itself to self-actualization, self-awareness, things of that nature, as well as the amygdala, which relates itself to emotional regs and all that things. So again, I couldn't emphasize how important it is to get educated on brain health, because that having a clean filter of life will allow you to really be in flow and, to allow yourself to fully actualize your fullest potential in this life.
And I do feel like we can train our brains to be mindful and aware and know our triggers and how to learn from them instead of repeating them.
Oh my God. Yeah. And so I'm not here to like push aside brain health. I can't emphasize enough how important it is. So things like just simple exercising, walking, promoting of blood flow to your brain, improves your mood, decreases anxiety, and, improves your sleep, all those secretions of those chemicals through just movement itself or meditation, having a lot of water, refraining yourself from alcohol, marijuana, caffeine, sugars, all of that, really promotes a healthy brain, which, influences a healthy life. But yes, when the brain and mind are open, it's kind of like a parachute. That's when higher consciousness could come through it. But a lot of people have all the stuff around them, but their filters are very blocked and need to be cleaned. And so I think if we're able to take better cares of our brain, as well as learning how to get into those deepened brainwave states. Because really, when you're accessing the spirit realm, what you're doing is you're decreasing the vibrations of your brain. And so, yes, you're amplifying your spiritual vibrations, but the vibratory frequency of your brain are decreasing. They're slowing down. And so you're going from when most people, they're multitasking, they're in beta brainwave stage. And then ideally, you want to get more into that alpha brainwave stage and to really be open, theta. And when you're sleeping, most people are in the delta brainwaves. So what people find is people who are, let's say, are professional intuitives, they're able to go from like brainwave one, the beta brainwaves to the alpha or the theta in just a span of like a second. A lot quicker. Most people have to like meditate for a couple hours to get there. But their brains, through whatever reason, and sometimes there's genetic components to intuition as it can run into family, but it's also a skill that could be developed throughout time. But again, allowing your brain to relax more, you're able to really allow the spirit realm to come through. And the next step is obviously trust and being open and being specific and just being good messengers of what you are able to see, because a lot of it is kind of like charades where you're being shown different things and it's a matter of interpretation and getting out of your own way and knowing the difference between your own thoughts and being able to receive. That's a big dichotomy.
When people pass away or go to the other side, do you think that everyone has a similar experience, or do you think they go different places depending on?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, Libby. What I would say is there's subjectivity to the other side. My heaven may look different than someone else's. My evidential background, my evidential proof for this is, for me at least, I'm a bit of a researcher myself in the afterlife and, skeptic too. I still consider myself a believer, but I believe it's kind of like a courtroom where you have to build a case that something's evidential, something's eternal, versus something that may be wishful thinking or projections of what we want. It's important to have that dichotomy. But oftentimes, I don't know if you've ever been read by, let's say, a tested evidential medium. What oftentimes comes through is spirits on the other side are doing things that they love to do over here. For instance, I live right on the water. No, I mean, I'm not Jesus, but next to the water, you know what I'm saying? And my grandfather always comes through. We have a dock right next to me. In every reading, they're like, your grandfather has his fishing rod and he's fishing all the time. He loves where you live. He's connected to you. And so, yes, on the other side, my grandfather loved to fish here. He'll love to fish over there. So our passions, the things that we love, will continue, as well as I do believe we are our loved ones' afterlife in a way. The lives that we live, our loved ones are connected to that. So just as we look at them as being the afterlife, we are their afterlife too in the way. We are living vicariously through them and they're connected to what we're doing. They have different work, healing and different missions over there. And there's a growth phase and a healing phase, but there's a subjectivity to it. Objectively, though, it's not a place of condemnation. It's a place of infinite love, infinite euphoria, and all is well. There's a timelessness that's certainly uniformal over there. And there's a joining of loved ones that we connected to in this lifetime in a reunion. So those are the things that are very much subjective. But, look, one person's bliss is not everyone's. And I firmly believe that. And that's why this life is so significant. There was I can't go one interview without mentioning my most influential teacher of my life in this lifetime. His name is Dr. Wayne Dyer. Just absolutely love him. But he was in a documentary called The Shift, and someone asked Dr. Wayne Dyer, how does one connect to God? How does one connect to spirit? And his answer is, all you need to do is to be enthusiastic. And people are like, what does that mean? And he said, within enthusiasm, it comes from the Greek word entheos, which means the inner divinity that we all have. And so when you're enthusiastic about the things that you like that are not trivial, do not take them trivially. The things over here, that's your connection to, spirit. That's your connection to that which is of divine. And so each person connects differently to their enthusiasms in this life. But that's something that I feel should be emphasized more, where it's not about escaping this reality and going over there. Our heaven is what we create in many ways over here, with the things that we love and the relationships that we have and the people like you who are making such a big difference in this world. So I would say love is all that lasts. That's the only uniformity of the other side. But beyond that, it's incredibly subjective.
You had mentioned purpose on this side versus purpose on the other side.
Yeah.
Could you go into detail about that?
Yeah, it's on the other side, we're used in many ways as vehicles and instruments of the divine. And so as much as we want to have, and I think this is part of what the podcast was birthed from, through, loved ones that we feel that leave us, we want to hold on to them forever. And we can. There are never any form of goodbyes in any ways, because our energies are always connected. But we are here as souls, having different experiences. And sometimes our impact on our surroundings is more over here than over there. And sometimes we're called to, from the other side, to continue that work. And many times spirits will work with us when we just don't recognize it. They're always trying to nudge us, to guide us. Ultimately, there's free will. But sometimes, as powerful as they are over here, their brilliance, their wisdom is used as guides and just kind of like angels over there in different ways. So again, this life is not random. Our time here is not, we're not just meant here to hang around. We're here for a purpose. And, we'll hang, over here as long as we're better used in many ways here. And that's hard, because for us, we're like, what do you mean? Like, my loved one was so much better served with me, and I'm at such a loss. But it has more to do with their soul's journey than what we're experiencing. And each person has a soul's journey that, is connected eternally to us, but it's specific to their, eternal curriculum, if that makes sense. And I'm trying to word it the right way, because I could see that as something that could upset people, and I'm trying to find ways to articulate it that's most reflective of what I saw. But there's no retirement home on the other side. It's not like you go there and just hang out. I mean, there's a healing phase, but life is an eternal process of service and trying to be there as our brothers and sisters keeper, over here and over there. But for instance, when it comes to maybe children crossing over, many times on the other side, maybe a child who crossed over very young or something like that could be a part of souls to help out parents who have lost, kids, and to be there. Or maybe a child made a decision, to complete suicide, stuff like that. So they might be joined with other souls, and they're helping out family members who are going through that, or maybe souls on this realm to progress through what they're going through. So it's, life is an eternal journey of service and giving to others, much like the angels that I saw. We're here to really evolve into who we truly are, and just to understand what that life, yes, in order to give, we need to take, but it's really about giving without expecting anything in return. And that's what the angels showed me. And I think that's really much a matter of the curriculum that we have here in this life.
I love that. So you talked about your spirit guides. Can you still talk to your spirit guides? Do you still communicate with them?
Yes, we all can, all the time. I'd be deceitful if I said it was the same exact feeling that I had in my NDE. NDEers have a lot of homesickness to them. We always crave that, and we crave experiences that could mirror what we saw here. It's like trying like the best possible food in the world, and then all of a sudden you're given like, things that are just like microwavable stuff, and you're trying to make the most of it. But nothing, nothing's in comparison to that. But part of this life is taking the mundane and making it sacred, and that's what we all have an opportunity to within this life. But yes, I do talk to them. They have come to me in different moments. Nowadays, I just call them guides, but I feel them closely with me, particularly in life's darkest moments. And I could tell you ultimately the biggest message that they have to all of us is to remember the impermanence of life. Sometimes when we are going through life, we take things so seriously. We think that whatever we're going through is going to last forever. And, no hardship does, no storm does. And they want you to remember that everything will work itself out, and just to trust. And so they help me when I get stuck on something that's very difficult, to remember I may not know what's around the corner, but I trust that there's no ending. And with that, I can navigate the roads of life a lot easier. No matter how many twists and turns, I know that I can never be damaged nor harmed in the greater scheme of things. And much of our reality is premised on our beliefs and our information. And, my hope is through these types of conversations, we could mirror something that's familiar to influence maybe one's belief. And with that information, that could really make a huge difference in how people surf the waves of their life and navigate the oceans and waters of their life. We're all just kind of surfers, just riding the waves that come to us. Sometimes those are tsunamis, but no matter what, we will go on. Not even death will stop us, and I'm living proof of that, nor will anything adversive. In fact, if you see something adversive, it could obviously, we could feel victimized by that, or we could find the hero's journey and the victor behind that. With every challenge has an opportunity for evolutionary growth. And so I think the spiritual journey is this life happening to me or for me. And if people are to remember that, the curriculum becomes a lot easier, and you're able to trust and surrender to a greater intelligence behind some of our resistance that comes to us through a lot of the adversity that we experience.
What advice do you have for someone that has recently lost someone and they're having a hard time coming to terms or dealing with it in general?
Yeah, I would say is to remember that you're not alone, that what you're feeling and experiencing is hardwired within us. I think part of this is understanding that you're not meant to bypass those feelings. You're meant to really learn how to work through them. And a lot of this has to deal with self-compassion, being patient with yourself, and how you relate to those feelings is how you could relate to another. And remember that all of life is a school. In many ways, it's a school to be a guide, like our loved ones are on the other side. And from going through this, your eternal curriculum will be enhanced, and you'll be that much more effective over here and over there. But there is a river of grief which will take you from great heartache potentially, agony, pain, suffering, to eventually finding meaning. And that meaning is you're able to understand the life that loved one lived, that they lived too, and you'll be able to remember their life and not just to focus on how they left us, because our loved ones want us to remember that they lived. And hopefully you could find ways to live, not just for them, but for yourselves most importantly too. And so that's very important. But each thing that we go through is an opportunity to shake us up and sometimes to wake us up. And it's a very much transformative experience. But I would say finding support, listening, and really honoring where you are, being self-compassionate and understanding that this is something that's hardwired to really transform ourselves in many ways. And we have all that it takes to really go through the river of grief that could take us from great heartache to finding meaning of that, loss and of that loved one. And like podcasts like yourself, eventually this could lead itself to bigger questions such as, where is my loved one? Where did they go? people will all of a sudden look at death and it will force them to reevaluate life. And that's, hopefully an ultimate gift that people could have, in terms of transformation. And there's a lot of growth and change that happens through this. I see it all the time. But absolutely, they could touch base with me regarding any support groups or grief groups. I would certainly encourage you to connect with grief groups that are consciously based. And I've worked with organizations such as Helping Parents Heal, the Forever Family Foundation, organizations that incorporate evidential mediums, people who have experienced NDEs, scientists, psychologists, because I do believe there's a big correlation of our own belief and our own grief. And if we're able to find a space to recognize that we are not just our bodies, nor our loved ones, we could find that there's a connection that goes beyond just the physical, but it starts with curiosity and openness. But first things first is to honor the human part. And then eventually, once you work through that, there's room for the spirit to come in this transformation.
I love that. I found in my experience, I believed everything that you're saying before. Mm-hmm. And then my mom died and I was like, is any of it true? I went through an anger stage where I did not believe any of it was true. And now I'm coming back to all of my beliefs because I do know those things.
Yeah.
It just takes something like that, you have to relearn sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes if you look at a picture, we see like a little dot, we focus on it, we just are very limited at that one little dot. But then you look behind that, you're able to see the beautiful picture. And sometimes challenges are like that in our life, but that was an integral part of the mosaic that we're in. And I always say the higher you go, the more that you can see. And we're coming from a place of anger and pain. It's hard to see past through that, but that's essential. The way out of grief is through it. It's not around it. And so obviously honoring what we're going through, because again, that's wired within ourselves. There's been thousands of losses before we were born. There'll be hopefully thousands of losses after, if we still have a planet, God willing. Maybe we'll have grief on Mars. I don't know. But what I'm saying is just to trust this intelligence and this hard wiring within ourselves. Which is countercultural. Countercultural is, all right, let's go to the next thing. It's all about what's trending. People are into the climactical, the sexy, and grief is not sexy. It's really could be very rough, difficult. But again, there's a beauty that you'll have and a connection that you'll be able to find. And many times people are able to have a lot of connections with their loved ones that they never had over here. And I've seen it time and time again when people have a, tremendous loss, it forces them in a way to reevaluate this life because they can't possibly conceptualize that their loved ones are gone. There's something that goes against their spirit, and they're able to listen to that voice. That darkness helps us, again, find that light, much like in my NDE. And through that, you recognize that there's a connection. And oftentimes, mediums I see all the time that have this great loss, and they just are able to start connecting not only to their loved one, but others. So there's a lot of transformative elements, but to be patient and to not try to go from A to Z quickly, that all the steps that you're taking are essential and there for a purpose and a reason.
Yes. So, Jacob, you have 2 books. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, I wrote my first book, Life After Breath, which is a homage to Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. And Dr. Raymond Moody is a good friend of mine, but he coined the term near-death experience in the mid-70s in his book, Life After Life. He's a clinical psychiatrist as well as a doctor in philosophy, but he's working in academic settings, and these students just kept on coming to him with these NDEs, and he just developed a research base and a criteria to name it so we could tame it, so to speak. So I do have the world of respect for him. But, I wrote the book really in the throes of the COVID pandemic. For me, that was my monastery, and there was so much pain. And I said, wow, there's so much pain, and that needs to influence my purpose. There's a big relationship of pain and purpose. And I saw that around me, and I said, it seemed like the world was going through a near-death experience with COVID and people just feeling suffocated. And I had this experience, my own suffocation, a different way. And I just wanted to infuse a sense of restorative breath and, spirit to people to really navigate that time. And they were going through, a lot of people going through grief and losses and trauma during that period. So I was able to really channel all that pain to really harness life after breath, and that gave me a lot of purpose. A little bit of background about myself. I was always a struggling student. I was placed in the lowest possible remedial courses for reading and writing in a community college. And, I was kind of like the black sheep of my family. Most of my sister was like, an academic, award-winning writer in a very high prolific college. And, I was always this kind of struggling student, but I just knew that there was something that was limitless inside of me and something that I was meant to have. And I think when you get out of your own way, you could surrender yourself to the infinite. And you don't have to be extraordinary to experience the extraordinary. We all are at the end of the day. You just have to get out of your own way. And so this book was just something that came through me, and it came from a place of service. And you come from a place of service, your potential is unlimited. I really do believe. And so that was the story of Life After Breath. And The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder came around 2 or 3 years later, and I published both books by around the age of 31, 32 years old, and now I'm 34, so they came out around a year or two ago. But The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is more of my dharma. Dharma is like the meaning, the essence of the NDE, and Life After Breath is the karma, is like the story and how I was able to live through it. Jacob's Ladder came from my NDE on a ladder on a slide. And of biblical Jacob, he was running from his life from his brother Esau, who was trying to kill him after getting the covenant from his father. And Jacob, took a pillar of rocks, and he slept in those pillar of rocks in a place I've been to in Israel called Beit El, which translates itself to the house of God. But he saw angels going up and down the ladder from the upper realms to the lower realms, and I had my NDE in a ladder in a playground on a slide. And so that's the allegorical reference, and something that I always share, where each lifetime is another opportunity to go higher, and the higher we go, the more that we can see. And so those are my two books. They're published by a publisher in California. They're available on Amazon, and they have Kindle, paperback, and now the audio version as well. So it's quite exciting. But yeah, I grew up going to libraries a lot, and reading a lot of self-help, spiritual books. And I said, geez, when I die, I don't want to be put in a grave. I want to be put next to these people. And it all came to true.
I meant to ask you this earlier and I forgot. Do you now remember your past lives?
Yes. I mean, not as clearly in my NDE, but they do come to me, and I've gone to regressions myself. I mean, right now I do provide, as a hypnotist, past life regressions to people. But yes, they come to me, but I try to focus on the room that I'm in. But ultimately, messages are repeated until those lessons are embraced, which is why it's so important for us to understand history on a collective and individual basis. Otherwise, we're likely to have regurgitated experience with more technology and Wi-Fi as we're having right now. We're seeing a lot of similar patterns on a collective basis. And so that's why self-awareness is so big, and that's why I try to give that over within the work that I do in past life, soul regressions to my clients. But yes, I do remember it. They do come to me, but ultimately it's just all right, so what's the essence, what's the lesson, and how could I incorporate this so that I could grow and learn and evolve as a soul here in this life.
So where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, so people could reach me on my webpage at jacoblcooper.com, jacoblcooper.com, and you could follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. I also have a YouTube channel called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder as well. And so that influences great thought leaders and influencers, and hopefully yourself if you have if it feels in alignment. So people could find me through a plethora of avenues. And you could also look at some of the services and upcoming events. I'm going to be presenting at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, in October, as well as a place called the Edgar Cayce Center, which, if you're familiar with Edgar Cayce, he has the Association of Research and Enlightenment. And Edgar Cayce was one of the most well-known medical intuitives and intuitives in American history. He's the equivalent of a Nostradamus, and he has this whole hospital that he's set up, and now they're continuing his legacy with a lot of different programming. So I'll be out there in Virginia Beach out in May. But yeah, a lot of exciting upcoming events, and I always try to surrender. Something potentially in Ireland is in the works too, so we'll have to wait and see.
Very nice. And can people work with you virtually?
Yeah, I have in-person sessions here in my office here in Long Island, and I have people that I see from here to New Zealand and Australia, so they could reach me through services as well.
That's amazing. Jacob, thank you so, so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom. I'm very, very grateful for it.
Oh, thank you. Without people like you, I would just be talking to myself all day. So thank you for opening up a great platform and asking some incredible questions. And I just hope that some of this resonated with viewers. So couldn't thank you enough for the work that you're doing, and you're generating the hope and the faith and the knowing past some of the pain. And that's incredibly healing and transformative. So thank you.
Thank you so much for watching Lost and Found. I really hope that this episode resonated with you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe below. There will be new episodes every Friday, and grief is hard, and you don't have to do it alone. And I love you, and I hope I see you next time.